Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Wednesday, May 6th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Got to tell you, star columnist Vahe Gregorian and I had a great time speaking with former Royals manager Ned Yost earlier this week. He was at his farm in Georgia, told us he hadn't gotten a haircut during the COVID-19 pandemic. That makes two of us, Ned. And that he always wears a mask the few times he goes out. He said he looks like a hippie Jesse James when he goes to the store. Vahe and I talked to Ned as part of a 5-year flashback the Star is doing. We're remembering the 2015 World Series championship, and Ned took us on the journey from his perspective every step of the way. We talked about not only the 3 series the Royals had to win to gain the crown, but what it took to get there, and how he, the staff, and the front office had to suffer through some growing pains to reach the postseason. We talked about how getting to the playoffs in 2014 and falling just short in the World Series inspired the 2015 team, and how that was evident from spring training and just the makeup of these championship Royals. Ned, who has spent a dozen years coaching in the ultra-successful Atlanta Braves organization, which won a World Series, a handful of National League pennants, and the division every year, said that the 2015 Royals weren't the most talented team he'd been around, but they were the closest. After a break, we'll spend more time with Ned as he tells the story of Game 6 of the American League Championship Series against the Toronto Blue Jays and his decision to stay with closer Wade Davis after a long rain delay. So here we go with Ned Yost and Vahe Gregorian and me.
You know, it's hard to really think about stuff, but you know, when I want to think that when they hit a 2 or 3 run homer off of Ryan Madsen to give him a 4-run lead, and we're going in the 8th inning, I'm like, geez, oh Pete, man, this is going to be a tough comeback. But our guys, you know, they just believed in themselves so strongly that when Alex Rios got on to lead off the inning, it's like, okay, here we go. I mean, you could just kind of feel it. Here we go. The guys were putting together great at-bats. Drew Butera put together a phenomenal at-bat, which was a key at-bat in that inning to keep things going. But, you know, everybody was really working the at-bats, really working to do everything they could to get on base and, you know, you've heard it so many times, keep the line moving, and, it just like snowballed. Here we go. Boom, 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 boom. And, you know, when that inning was over, it was like, holy cow, that was unbelievable.
Is there any way to define why you guys were able to pull off all those comebacks? I mean, maybe it's obvious in one sense that talent and resilience, but not every team that's talented and resilient can do that. I wonder what allowed you guys to carve that out.
I don't know. I just think our guys were extremely close. They were extremely confident in not only themselves but each other's abilities. They leaned on each other. They trusted each other. And the thing that we didn't have anybody that would give up. You know, we didn't have anybody that think, oh man, we're down 4 runs in the 8th inning, let's go get them tomorrow, or that would think negative thoughts. You know, this was a group of positive thinkers, and they just stayed after it. They were gamers. They were winners. I mean, that's what a winner is—a guy that continues to fight right to the end until he's got no more pitches to throw or no more pitches to be seen. And these guys, that's what they were. They were a focused group. They probably weren't the most talented World Championship team ever, but they were as close as any team I've ever been around, and were as big a collection of winners. The biggest collection of winners that I've ever been around.
And Ned, something else that occurred to me about this team is that you got contributions not only from your frontline guys, but everybody on the postseason roster. I mean, throughout the postseason, guys like Christian Colon and Terrence Gore and Dyson, of course, and and pitchers like Chris Young. I mean, everybody stepped up over that postseason. How rare is that?
I mean, I don't know. You have to have that to win a world championship. You know, you got to have guys that are talented and play their best baseball when it counts. And you know, that's exactly what they did. There was nobody that you know, felt the challenge was too big for them. There was nobody that you know, didn't want to be in a tough situation. They all did, because they all felt like they were going to be successful.
One of the things, Ned, that always stood out is how much these guys grew, you know, under you, basically. But I also remember you feeling like you grew through them. And I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit, on what they gave you as a manager to learn and grow from.
What did you say? What gave you?
Did I always had the sense that you felt like they grew through you, but that you grew from those players in that group, that they made you learn to be a better manager. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, I definitely did. You know, I felt, you know, I grew up, I think you're a product of your environment, and my environment was growing up as a coach under Bobby Cox. And Bobby was, you know, as a manager, he was very particular on respect of the game. You know, you respect the uniform, you respect the opposition, you respect the game through your play, through your hustle, through your appearance. So, you know, I think I was always, you know, I was always trying to make sure guys were doing that. You know, and at times it got to be a point where it would stifle their personality a little bit. Instead of understanding that these kids are all hungry and that they're all different personality-wise, you know, and allow them to be themselves. If you allow them to be themselves, you probably get the most out of them. And I think that was the lesson that I learned more than anything else, is that, you know, there's a pretty big age difference between, you know, some of these guys. When I'm pushing 59, 60, and these guys are in their you know, low 20s and mid 20s, you know, it's a different generation. So, you know, I had to learn how to handle them different, and couldn't handle them the way that we were handled when we came up. It was a different group. You know, that we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have computer games. You know, we played outside till your mom, you know, called you home. If you messed up, your coach would yell and scream at you. You just kind of took it, you know. Okay, I'll do better next time. And you know, it was just a different generation, and you had to learn, or I had to learn to adapt to that. You know, to allow them to in order to be the best that they can, allow them to be themselves, because they were all great kids. They were all winners and competitors, and just allow them to play their game, allow them to be who they are, be comfortable every time they step on that field. It would probably, you know, bode well for us, and it did. And that's, I think, the biggest lesson that I learned. Quit trying to make them like yourself, and just allow them to be themselves.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that certainly has always stood out to me about what you gave them were guys like Moustakas or Escobar. That stands out to me. They clearly benefited from your faith in them, whether it was in the moment or when Moose was getting sent down, or when you kept batting Esky when he wasn't really able to match up at that point. I just wonder if you could speak to your need to give them positivity all the time, and how much you think that really paid off.
Well, it paid off. It was huge. And, you know, it's a different, you know, I knew that we had a group of young kids that were coming up. And through my experience with Atlanta, through my experience with Milwaukee, I knew it was going to take about somewhere between 2.5 years before they would get settled in and start to be, you know, players that would mold into a championship caliber type player. So I knew that in order for them to be successful, they had to go through these periods. And a lot of people, the problem that you run into, especially back when I started playing, if you went 0 for 10, 0 for 12, you know, you put your butt on the bench. And then if you did it for too much longer, they sent you down to the minor leagues. There was no developing at the big league level. Well, in our case, we had to develop at the big league level. We had to have these kids up here in that environment, learning to get comfortable, learning how to win, learning how to play the game in that environment, so that when they got there, we could take off. And I knew that patience was key. I mean, more than anything else. Moose had to go through his ups and downs to become the player that he is today. Kane had to go through his ups and downs. Esky, they all did. Haas did. They all did. And I think more than anything else, you know, you have to allow them time to develop. And you can't look at it as a short-term thing. You can't look at it as an 0 for 10, 0 for 12, put them on the bench. You know, you got to let them ride. If they're hitting 140, you know, J.J. Hardy, I learned a great lesson on that when I was in Milwaukee. J.J. was hitting, you know, 160. The owner came in and he was really upset. He did not want me playing J.J. Hardy anymore, and J.J. was a rookie. And he asked me, he said, how much longer are you going to play a shortstop that's hitting 160? I'm like, as long as I'm here every day, this kid's going to play because he's going to be a good player. And, of course, next year, J.J. ended up making the All-Star team, hit 25 home runs, because we gave him the leeway to become the player that he was, you know, supposed to be. But that's how it works. And it's hard when you start putting pressure on younger players for them to, you know, to develop. It takes them longer. So, you know, my mindset was, all right, let them go through them, support them. You know, as long as they're playing hard, as long as they're not getting defeated, allow them to go through this, because they're going to need this experience when crunch time comes.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. We're back with our interview with former Royals manager Ned Yost, and we pick up the conversation talking about the important acquisitions of Ben Zobrist and Johnny Cueto in July of 2015. And then we get into the American League Championship Series against the Toronto Blue Jays. We get to Game 6 with the Royals leading 3-2. The Blue Jays had tied the game in the 8th on Juan Bautista's 2-run homer. Yost went with closer Wade Davis to get the final 2 outs of the inning, and then came a 45-minute rain delay. And the Royals scored in the bottom of the 8th, so it had been more than an hour since the last time Davis had pitched. But we know that Yost brought Davis back to throw the 9th. How did he reach that decision? He explains in this part of the conversation. Hey, Ned, in late July that year, you guys were 25 games over 500. You were leading the division by 10. I mean, I think it was pretty established that the Royals were the best team, at least in the American League, if not all of baseball. And yet, you guys went out and got two big pieces in Ben Zobrist and Johnny Cueto. What did they bring, and why was it important? What made those acquisitions important?
Well, what made it important was, I think we talked about it a little bit ago, was we were 90 feet short, and the year before, and I think Dayton was going to do everything that he could, and Mr. Glass, they were going to do everything that they could to make sure that we weren't going to be 90 feet short this year. They were both tremendous players. They were both, you know, Ben Zobrist was a huge part of our club offensively and defensively, and Johnny Cueto, you know, gave us a great boost. He pitched, you know, a couple of great games in the playoffs. You know, that, you know, were very, very, you know, beneficial to us and very important for us to help us win that World Championship. But, you know, we didn't make any moves in 14, and, you know, we felt like we were good enough, to win. But like I said, we were just 90 feet short, and Dayton was going to he wasn't going to leave any stone unturned in 15. He was going to give us every opportunity, to make sure that we weren't 90 feet short in 15.
Ned, sort of the flip side of that, you have those contributions from those guys, but then you get big moments from Alex Gordon, for instance. I wonder just how much you savored seeing that for Alex after all his ups and downs and what a Kansas City icon he had become.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, how far he's come. And, when I first joined the organization in 2010, Alex had gotten set down to become a left fielder. And, so I didn't see him until we called him up, later in the year. But the thing that I saw was enough for me was I saw Alex in spring training. And I knew that he was a number one pick. I knew he was extremely talented. And I would watch him when Kansas City would play Milwaukee. I would watch him. 1, 2. I knew that small market teams can't miss on their number one picks. They can't. So, we as a coaching staff had to do everything that we could to give Alex the opportunity to be successful. And Alex would reciprocate. We all know Alex now, is that Alex would work as hard or harder than anybody I've ever been around. I can't honestly say that I've never seen a more consistent, harder worker than Alex Gordon. There's just nobody in my whole career have I seen that is that dedicated to not only diet, strength training, and hard work and practice every single day to be the best that he can. Alex Gordon is it. So, to watch him become the player that he has become the player, and you're right, he's an icon in Kansas City. It's just it's a good feeling for me. I'm so proud of him. I've seen him go through the ups and downs, and I'm really pleased with what he's been able to accomplish in his career. And I was thinking about him the other day. What does this thing do for him? What if this game doesn't come back this year? Does he play one more year? Who knows? But he's sure been a treat to watch all these years.
Yeah. Well, Ned, I guess, that Game 5 of the Houston series was pretty memorable for Johnny's game, and then there you are on into the championship series again. I wonder what stands out to you about playing Toronto and how that unfolded.
Well, I know what for me, Toronto made me nervous. Houston made me nervous. I felt like Houston was exactly like we were a year before, 2 years before. They were young, they were talented, they were aggressive. They played the game hard, and when we won Game 5, that was a great feeling. But then again, it's like, okay, we're not done yet. We got this tough Toronto team, and going into the last day of the season, I remember the last couple games in Minnesota. We were still fighting for best record, and it was important to me to win best record because I didn't want to have to go to Toronto 4 times. But again, our guys with their confidence and their mindset, they didn't care. They would go to Toronto 7 times. They didn't care. They wanted to be healthy, and they wanted to be ready for the playoffs, and that was their mindset. So luckily we ended up winning the last day, and Toronto might have lost. Anyway, we got best record, so that saved that. But we knew Toronto was going to be, one tough series. And luckily for us, we had 4 games at home. We only needed 3 of them, but I remember it was a tough series, and was never ever comfortable.
Well, that clinching game against Toronto was memorable for so many reasons, but one of them was Wade Davis, coming back after the rain delay. Could you take us through what just his determination, his mindset, and bringing Wade Davis back after that? I think it was about 45 minutes.
Yeah, I knew I knew rain was coming. And it was the 8th inning. I was trying to get through the 8th without having to use weight because I knew there was going to be a rain delay. And, I'm like, okay, we put Ryan Matson out there. Come on, Ryan, you can, hold this fort for us. And ends up giving up a 2-run. I think I had 3-1 at the time. Ended up giving up a 2-run homer and then a base hit. And now I'm like, okay, I can't let this game slip away. I got to bring Wade in. And I remember Wade, boom, boom, getting the last 2 outs and coming in. When he hit the top step, it started pouring down rain. And I was as frustrated. I can't really, I don't know if I was mad, I was frustrated, I was pissed off that it was raining, because I knew that this was probably going to be a 20-minute rain delay, 25-minute rain delay, and my closer now is sitting on the bench after, getting hot. So as we got to the 20-minute mark, the 25-minute mark, they got under the 30-minute mark, I started getting madder, and and we got to the 35-minute mark, and, I walked in and I asked Wade, I said, you okay? And Wade goes, I'm fine. Man, I'm good. I'm don't worry about it. I got it. So I'm like, all right. And I think it was like 45 minutes before we resumed. But when we did resume, the one thing that kind of made me feel better was seeing Lorenzo Cain score from first on Haas's double down the right field line. That made all that upset, mad, pissed off go away right there. We had the lead again, and if there's anybody that I would send out on the mound after a 45-minute rain delay, it'd be Wade Davis with his determination, his mindset. And he sure enough, he made it a little interesting, but it was sure exciting.
That'll do it for today. We'll hear from Ned Yost again in the coming weeks as the Star reviews the Royals' 2015 postseason run to the World Series championship. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett, and a tip of the cap to Vahe Gregorian today. Links to the stories we discussed can be found in the show notes, along with all of the Stars' retrospective of the 2015 postseason. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass coverage, and that still stands. It's a good deal. $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage. Here's an even better offer. Get the entire Kansas City Star. Sports, news, features, commentary, analysis, all of it. You get all the stories written by the Star's talented staff. Details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. In either case, the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're supporting local journalism and helping us deliver products like SportsBeat KC, which will be back on Thursday because this is where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.